The crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the private dining room at the Plaza Hotel. It had been 3 years since Dad's passing, and this annual asset review meeting was our family's new tradition. Ashley's voice sliced through the murmur of conversation. Elena finally decided to grace us with her presence. Still playing secretary at Dad's old management office? She smoothed her Oscar de la Renta dress, one of many designer pieces I recognized but pretended not to notice. I adjusted my simple black dress and managed a polite smile. If only she knew that tomorrow morning I'd be signing the papers to take control of both her real estate development company and Marcus's financial firm. Still at the property management office, I replied, accepting a glass of champagne from the waiter. The same office that served as the nerve center for Rhodes Holdings, my multi-billion-dollar investment empire that now owned most of downtown. I'm Elena Rhodes, though in certain circles I'm known as Rhodes Holdings, one of the most powerful private equity firms in the country. But to my family, I'm just the younger daughter who settled for managing Dad's leftover business. Marcus, wearing a Brioni suit that cost more than most people's cars, squeezed my shoulder condescendingly. Listen, Elena, if you ever want a real job, Sterling Capital could use a good receptionist. I'd be happy to put in a word for you. I took a sip of champagne to mask my amusement. Sterling Capital was already mine. I'd been systematically acquiring it through a dozen shell companies over the past 18 months. That's very thoughtful of you, Marcus, I said quietly, watching him bask in his own perceived generosity. 3 years ago, when Dad passed away, everyone assumed his vast fortune would be divided equally among his children. Instead, he left specific bequests. Marcus inherited Sterling Capital and $100 million in investment funds. Ashley received Summit Developments and $50 million in development capital. And I got what everyone considered the consolation prize, his small property management office and a modest trust fund. Poor Elena, they'd whispered at the will reading. Robert always had a soft spot for her. Too bad he didn't leave her something more substantial. What they didn't know was that Dad's small office controlled a vast network of properties across 3 states. He'd spent decades quietly assembling one of the largest private real estate portfolios in the country. More importantly, he'd spent every Sunday afternoon teaching me the art of invisible empire building. You're the only one who really gets it, Elena, he'd told me during our last lesson before his heart attack. True power whispers, it never needs to shout. Now, watching my siblings parade their success like peacocks, I remembered his words. They'd burned through their inheritances on mansions, yachts, and social status, while I'd quietly built something that dwarfed their wildest dreams. Elena, sweetheart, my mother Victoria glided over in her Chanel suit. We missed you at the charity gala last week. Ashley was telling everyone about Summit's latest project. Ashley's eyes lit up with practiced enthusiasm. We just secured another $100 million in funding, from Rhodes Holdings, actually. Not that you'd understand the complexities of real estate development, Elena. I thought about the confidential reports on my desk showing Summit Development's staggering losses, 3 consecutive quarters in the red. The $100 million wasn't growth capital, it was life support. And tomorrow, Ashley would discover that Rhodes Holdings, her mysterious savior, was actually her underachieving sister. That sounds impressive, I murmured, keeping my voice neutral. Marcus couldn't let Ashley steal the spotlight. Sterling Capital just closed deals on 5 new hedge funds. We're projecting returns that'll make Warren Buffett jealous. I knew the truth. His firm was drowning in bad debt, making increasingly desperate gambles to stay afloat. That's why my takeover had been so simple, panicked people don't read the fine print. How wonderful for you both, I said, and I meant it. Their desperation had made my acquisitions almost too easy. The meeting dragged on with more friendly advice about my career choices. I endured it all, maintaining my role as the family's underachiever. Even when Mom chimed in with her usual concerns. Elena, darling, have you thought about going back to school? Maybe getting your MBA? She touched my arm gently. Your father would want you to do something more with your life. I'm content where I am, Mom, I replied, thinking of tomorrow's meeting where my siblings would learn that their silent partner was their little sister. Ashley overheard and laughed, the sound sharp as broken glass. Content? Oh, Elena, you should aim higher than content. Summit Developments is about to transform the entire East Coast real estate market. We're getting another major investment next month, from Rhodes Holdings, actually. Marcus jumped in eagerly. Rhodes Holdings is the most powerful player in private equity right now. Very secretive, but they seem fascinated by both our companies. I hid my smile behind my champagne flute. Rhodes Holdings, my carefully orchestrated network of shell companies and blind trusts, had spent years building a reputation for ruthless efficiency. Tomorrow, the veil would lift. I've heard of them, I said mildly. They seem to be everywhere these days. As if you'd understand anything about real high-stakes business, Ashley scoffed. Stick to managing Dad's dingy little office, Elena. Leave the real empire building to those of us who inherited his actual talent. Before I could respond, the maitre d' announced dinner was served. I found myself seated between Marcus and Ashley, forced to listen as they competed over whose empire was more impressive. Sterling Capital is about to close the deal of the century, Marcus bragged, sawing at his filet mignon. Once Rhodes Holdings commits, we'll dominate the entire financial sector. Ashley scoffed, twirling her wine glass. Please. Summit Developments is reshaping urban America. Rhodes Holdings is far more interested in real estate than your glorified gambling operation. If they only knew that both their companies were already mine. Their fates had been sealed in quiet boardrooms and carefully orchestrated takeovers over the past year. Speaking of careers, my mother interjected from across the table, her voice carrying that familiar worried tone. Elena dear, have you considered going back to school? Stanford has an excellent executive MBA program. It's never too late to make something of yourself. I thought about my real office, the one my family had never seen, with its panoramic view of the San Francisco skyline and the wall displaying my growing empire of acquisitions. I'm happy where I am, Mom. That's exactly your problem, Elena, Marcus said, pointing his fork at me. No ambition, no vision. Dad would be devastated to see you wasting your potential. My fingers found the small silver key hanging from my necklace, the key to Dad's private office where I'd learned everything about building invisible empires. I think Dad understood me better than you realize. The conversation drifted to family gossip, but I caught fragments of Marcus and Ashley's anxious whispers. Both were desperately counting on tomorrow's meeting with Rhodes Holdings to rescue their failing ventures. Neither suspected that their mysterious benefactor was the sister they'd dismissed for years. As dessert was served, I excused myself early. Important day at the office tomorrow, I said, triggering the usual patronizing smiles. Don't strain yourself filing all those documents, Ashley called out, laughing at her own tired joke. In my car, a modest Lexus with reinforced panels and bulletproof glass, I called my assistant Sarah. Is everything prepared for tomorrow? Yes, Ms. Rhodes. The contracts are finalized and the board has been notified. Your siblings won't know what hit them. I drove home to my penthouse, decorated with understated elegance rather than the gaudy displays Ashley favored or Marcus's collection of overpriced art. Dad had taught me that true wealth whispers. In my private office, I reviewed the acquisition documents one final time. Tomorrow, Rhodes Holdings would drop its mask, and my family would discover that their underachieving sister had built an empire that dwarfed their wildest ambitions. I picked up the framed photo on my desk, the last picture of Dad and me in his office, taken just weeks before his heart attack. He wore that knowing smile, the one that said he saw in me what everyone else missed. The most devastating victories, he used to say, are the ones they never see coming until it's too late. Tomorrow, my family would finally understand what he meant. The morning after the asset review meeting, I arrived at my downtown office building early, not in my usual conservative attire, but wearing a Tom Ford power suit that cost more than Ashley's monthly mortgage. Sarah met me in the private elevator, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. Both your siblings are already here, she reported, barely suppressing a smile. Ashley's demanded fresh coffee 3 times, and Marcus keeps checking his watch like he's timing a bomb. Fear makes people predictable, I observed. They know their companies are drowning. They just don't know I'm the one holding them under. The conference room commanded the entire 40th floor, with windows overlooking the city I'd quietly conquered. Marcus and Ashley sat at opposite ends of the mahogany table, both failing to project confidence. Their teams of lawyers looked even more uncomfortable. What the hell is she doing here? Ashley snapped when I entered. This is a confidential meeting with Rhodes Holdings. Marcus nodded dismissively. Elena, I appreciate your interest, but this is way above your pay grade. Why don't you go fetch us some coffee while we wait for the real players? I set my briefcase on the table, savoring this moment I'd orchestrated so carefully. Actually, I think you'll find I understand the situation perfectly. Sarah began distributing leather portfolios to everyone present. Ladies and gentlemen, please review the documents before you. You'll find complete documentation of Rhodes Holdings' controlling interest in both Sterling Capital and Summit Developments, along with the restructuring proposals. Marcus went pale as he scanned the pages. Ashley's perfectly manicured hands trembled. This is impossible, she breathed. Rhodes Holdings is you? Elena Rhodes, I confirmed, taking my seat at the head of the table. Founder and CEO of Rhodes Holdings, majority shareholder of 15 major corporations. And as of this morning, the new owner of both your companies. Marcus slammed his fist on the table. This is insane. Your dad's office manager. No, I corrected him calmly. I let you believe I was just an office manager. Just like I let you believe Dad's property management business was worthless. Just like I let you both think your companies still belong to you. But Summit is worth billions. Ashley stammered, her voice cracking. Was worth billions, I corrected. Before you buried it in $300 million of toxic debt. The only reason you got that emergency funding was because I arranged it through one of my subsidiary firms. Marcus was frantically flipping through pages, his face growing more ashen with each revelation. Sterling Capital. Dad's pride and joy. Has been under my control for 6 months, I said quietly. Those desperate hedges you've been making to cover your losses? I've been on the other side of every trade, systematically acquiring your debt. The conference room doors burst open. My mother rushed in, followed by several board members and family lawyers, obviously summoned by panicked messages from my siblings. What's happening here? Why are Marcus and Ashley texting about Elena and Rhodes Holdings? My mother demanded, her voice tight with confusion. Perfect timing, I said, rising from my chair. Sarah, please start the presentation. The wall display illuminated, revealing an intricate network of corporations, investments, and strategic acquisitions. My true empire, built methodically over 3 years while my family dismissed me as Dad's charity case. Rhodes Holdings, I explained to my stunned family, currently controls over $10 billion in assets spanning real estate, finance, and technology sectors. That includes both Sterling Capital and Summit Developments, along with controlling interests in 47 other major corporations. But, how is this possible? My mother whispered, sinking into the nearest chair. Remember Dad's tiny management office? The one you all felt sorry for me inheriting? It was the nerve center of a property empire spanning 3 states, with holdings worth billions. While you were all flaunting your obvious success, I was building something substantial. Ashley found her voice, fury replacing her shock. You've been lying to us. All these years, pretending to be some pathetic office clerk. Like you pretended Summit wasn't hemorrhaging money? I countered smoothly. Or Marcus boasting about Sterling's profits while desperately juggling debt to avoid bankruptcy? We were building legitimate businesses. Marcus protested, his face flushed. No, I corrected him. You were building facades. You were so obsessed with appearing successful that you forgot to actually be successful. I turned to address the lawyers. Now, shall we proceed with the acquisition terms? Both companies will be absorbed into Rhodes Holdings. Current management positions are under review. You can't do this, Ashley whispered, her voice barely audible. I already have. While you were all mocking Dad's secretary, I was mastering every aspect of corporate finance. I was cultivating relationships, understanding power dynamics, learning how real wealth operates. My mother approached me, tears streaming down her face. Why didn't you tell us? Why all the deception? Would you have believed me? Or would you have tried to manage my life like you always did, convinced I couldn't handle it alone? I reached into my briefcase and withdrew a faded photograph of Dad in his private office, teaching me about compound interest and patient capital during one of our Sunday sessions. Dad knew exactly what he was doing when he left me that worthless office. He knew I'd understand its true value. The next several hours passed in a blur of legal documents, heated negotiations, and corporate restructuring. Eventually, both Marcus and Ashley had to concede that their companies needed Rhodes Holdings resources to survive. Their egos were shattered, but their positions, pending performance reviews, remained intact. As the conference room emptied, my mother remained behind. All this time, she said quietly, we thought we were the successful ones. True success doesn't need an audience, I replied, echoing Dad's favorite saying. Sometimes the quietest person in the room holds all the cards. Over the next 6 months, everything changed. Summit Developments, under proper management and with adequate funding, actually began turning profits. Marcus, demoted from CEO but kept on as senior advisor, finally started learning the business instead of just playing executive. The family dynamics transformed completely. The patronizing remarks ceased. The pitying glances vanished. At the next family gathering, when someone asked about my work, they listened, truly listened, for the first time in my life. Dad's old management office? I kept it exactly as it was. Renovated the building but preserved his private office, leaving his desk untouched. Sometimes, late at night, I'd sit there and remember our Sunday lessons about invisible power and patient capital. One evening, as I was leaving the building, I found Marcus waiting in the lobby. I've been thinking, he said, his usual arrogance replaced by genuine humility. All those years we spent showing off, competing for attention, we missed what Dad was really trying to teach us. I smiled, fingering the silver key I still wore around my neck. What was that? That real power isn't about looking successful. It's about being successful. And you built an empire while Ashley and I were playing dress-up. I thought about all those family dinners, all the cutting remarks, all the years of being dismissed as the family failure. Want to know the real secret, Marcus? He nodded, leaning forward eagerly. Success doesn't need applause. It just needs patience, wisdom, and the courage to keep building when everyone thinks you're wasting your time. As I walked to my car that night, I gazed up at the city skyline, my skyline, though few people knew it. Sometimes the greatest triumph isn't proving others wrong. Sometimes it's proving yourself right, quietly and completely, until they have no choice but to acknowledge the truth that was there all along. And sometimes, just sometimes, that truth comes with a $10 billion empire and the sweetest vindication of all, success on your own terms.